The early morning sunlight filtered through the dusty blinds of a small, run-down apartment, casting narrow stripes across the floor. Mark Peterson rubbed his eyes and sighed, glancing at the small table where a single cup of instant coffee sat, cooling. His daughter, Lily, sat at the counter, munching on a piece of bread he had managed to buy the night before. It had been a rough week. His hours at the construction site had been cut due to budget constraints, and bills were piling up faster than he could manage. Rent, utilities, and Lily's school expenses loomed over him like storm clouds. He had been running on empty for days, surviving on the hope that something, anything, would give him a break. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Lily said, her small voice laced with innocence but tinged with worry. "I know, sweetie," he said, forcing a smile. "Breakfast isn't ready yet, but we'll have something soon." The truth was harsher. The fridge was nearly empty. The cupboards were bare. He had hoped to scrape together enough change to buy cereal or bread, but after last night's groceries, the money was gone. Mark decided that the only solution was to step out, find a place that served affordable breakfast, and hope for the best. He dressed quickly, pulling on his worn jacket, and handed Lily a scarf. "Stay here, I'll be back with breakfast," he said, trying to mask his anxiety. Outside, the streets were already bustling. The smell of coffee and baked goods wafted from a nearby diner, its neon sign flickering in the morning light. Mark hesitated at the entrance. The diner looked welcoming, but his pockets were empty, not even enough for a single meal. He took a deep breath, trying to push away the embarrassment, and walked inside. The diner was a small, cozy place with a few booths and a counter lined with stools. Early morning patrons sipped coffee, read newspapers, and quietly enjoyed their breakfast. A bell chimed as Mark entered, drawing the attention of a young waitress who was wiping down the counter. "Good morning. Table for one?" she asked brightly. Mark nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, just me." She gestured to a booth near the window. "Right this way. What can I get you?" Mark's stomach twisted. The waitress expected an order, but he had no money. He swallowed hard. "Actually, I don't have any money today," he admitted, his voice low. The waitress blinked, a brief look of surprise crossing her face. "Oh, Mark continued quickly. I thought maybe I could get something small. I can pay next time." The waitress smiled warmly, ignoring the discomfort radiating from him. "It's okay," she said, her voice gentle. "Sit down. I'll take care of it." Mark froze. You don't have to." "I insist," she said firmly, placing a hand lightly on the menu. "Everyone deserves breakfast, especially in the morning." Mark hesitated, his pride warring with his desperation. But the hunger in his stomach and the thought of Lily going without pushed him forward. He nodded, grateful, and slid into the booth. She returned shortly with a cup of steaming coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit. The aroma was intoxicating. Mark felt tears prick at his eyes, the kindness of a stranger hitting him harder than any hardship he had faced. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice choked. "Don't mention it," she replied, smiling. "Eat first. Everything else can wait." As Mark ate, he watched the waitress move through the diner with grace, serving others while never missing a beat. There was a light in her eyes, a genuine warmth that made the entire place feel brighter. He realized that her simple act of generosity was more than a free meal. It was hope, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Meanwhile, Lily waited at home, bouncing with excitement. She had no idea about the breakfast arrangement yet. She trusted her father, but mornings without food had become a frustrating routine. She had learned to make do, but every now and then, the pang of hunger reminded her of their struggles. Mark returned home half an hour later, carrying a small paper bag with breakfast. Lily's eyes lit up. "Did you get it?" she asked eagerly. He smiled, handing her a piece of toast. "Yes, thanks to a very kind waitress," he said. Lily bit into the bread, savoring the warmth and taste. This is so good, Daddy." Mark watched her eat, a mixture of relief and guilt washing over him. He wanted to shield her from their difficulties, but reality had a way of creeping in. Still, today, thanks to a stranger's generosity, he had been able to provide her with more than just food. He had given her hope. The next morning, Mark returned to the diner, this time determined to pay for the breakfast he hadn't been able to afford the day before. He hesitated at the entrance, unsure if the waitress remembered him, but the bell chimed, and she looked up, smiling warmly. "Back again?" she asked cheerfully. "Yes," he replied, voice steady. "I want to pay for yesterday. I couldn't before, but I want to now." She shook her head. "Don't worry about it. Really, you're here today, that's enough. Seeing you back is thanks enough." Mark felt a swell of gratitude. Her generosity wasn't just about giving. It was about giving without expectation, without judgment. As the weeks went by, Mark became a regular at the diner. The waitress, whose name he learned was Sophie, treated him and Lily with the same warmth and kindness every time. Sometimes she would place a little extra fruit on Lily's plate, or make a cup of cocoa just right. She never asked for anything in return. Mark found himself opening up to her slowly, sharing snippets of his life, his struggles, and his hopes for Lily. Sophie listened, never interrupting, never judging, just listening. In her presence, Mark felt a rare sense of peace, a reminder that not all people measured life by money or status. But Mark's challenges weren't gone. Bills still piled up, work remained uncertain, yet somehow the small kindness from Sophie created a ripple effect. It gave him energy, hope, and courage to keep going. He began looking for ways to improve their situation, small steps towards stability, motivated by the knowledge that someone had believed in him when he couldn't even believe in himself. One evening, after a long day, Mark walked Lily home from the diner. She clutched her stuffed rabbit and hummed happily. "Daddy, Sophie is nice," she said. "Yes, she is," Mark replied. "She reminds us that even when life is hard, there are good people out there." Lily smiled, finishing her toast. "Can we go see her again tomorrow?" Mark nodded, heart full. "Yes, sweetheart, we can." The next morning, Mark woke earlier than usual. Lily was still asleep, curled up with her rabbit, a faint smile on her lips. Mark silently brewed coffee and packed a small bag of essentials. He wanted to make it to the diner before it got crowded. Today he had an idea. Sophie was already bustling about when he arrived, setting down cups of coffee and organizing orders with her. Usual bright energy. Her smile greeted him immediately. "Morning, Mark?" "And Lily," she said, nodding warmly as she noticed him sitting at a table near the window. "Morning, Sophie," he replied, a bit nervous. I wanted to thank you again for yesterday. You really helped us." Sophie waved him off. "You don't need to thank me. You were doing your best. I just made sure you had food." Mark nodded, still a bit flustered. "I know, but it meant more than just breakfast. You gave me hope, and that's something I haven't had much of lately." Sophie paused, her expression softening. "Sometimes all we need is a little kindness, Mark. You'll find your way, I'm sure." Over the following weeks, the diner became a sanctuary for Mark and Lily. Sophie would always make sure they had enough to eat, sometimes slipping in a small extra treat for Lily. More than food, it was the atmosphere she created, the sense that everything could be okay, even when life outside was chaotic. Mark began noticing subtle changes in himself. He started looking for odd jobs, small ways to earn a little extra, motivated by the belief that he could provide more for Lily. He no longer wallowed in frustration or despair as often. Sophie's unassuming generosity had sparked something within him, a determination he hadn't realized he still had. One rainy morning, a crisis hit. Lily had dropped her backpack in a puddle on the way to school, soaking her books and supplies. Mark panicked, thinking about the money needed to replace everything. But he remembered Sophie's words. A little kindness could create a ripple effect. He took a deep breath and called the diner. "Sophie, I know this might be strange, but do you have any extra paper or supplies?" Sophie laughed softly. "You'd be surprised what I have lying around." "Come by, I'll help you out." Mark arrived within minutes. Sophie handed him a small stack of pap, some notebooks, and a few pencils she had set aside. "Consider it a gift," she said. "Lily will be okay." Mark felt tears sting his eyes. You have no idea what this means," he said. "I have a little idea," Sophie replied. "It's not just about the supplies, it's about hope. Keep going, Mark. You're doing your best." That evening, Lily hugged her new supplies tightly. "Thank you, Daddy, and thank you, Sophie," Mark smiled, hugging his daughter. "Yes, thank you, Sophie," he said, sending a silent prayer of gratitude into the quiet room. Days turned into weeks, and Mark's confidence began to grow. He managed to secure a slightly more stable construction job, which combined with small side jobs allowed him to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. Sophie never asked for anything, never made him feel embarrassed, and continued to offer gentle encouragement. One afternoon, while enjoying a quiet moment at the diner, Sophie leaned across the counter and said, "Mark, you're doing really well. You've come so far in such a short time." Mark hesitated, unsure how to respond. I just don't want to fail Lily," he admitted. "You won't," Sophie said firmly, "because you care. You love her. That's more than anyone else can give." Mark's chest tightened. He realized she was right. His love for Lily was the strongest force in his life, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. Sophie's kindness had simply reminded him of that. Soon, a small miracle happened. The diner held a charity morning for struggling families, offering free meals to those in need. Sophie encouraged Mark to attend with Lily. "It's your turn to receive a little support," she said with a wink. When they arrived, Mark was overwhelmed by the generosity of others. People donated, shared, and offered encouragement. It wasn't just the food, it was the sense of community, the realizatio, that there were people willing to care and support those trying their best. Mark looked at Lily, her eyes wide with wonder, and knew that this moment would stay with her forever. He also understood that Sophie had created more than just a meal. She had created an entire ripple of kindness that would inspire others, including him. By the end of the week, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. He began planning small ways to give back, starting with helping other struggling families at the diner. He and Sophie worked quietly behind the scenes, organizing donations of food, clothes, and supplies. One evening, as they closed the diner, Sophie smiled. "You've grown so much, Mark. You're strong, and your heart is bigger than you realize." Mark smiled back, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not just in himself, but in the life he was slowly building for Lily. "None of this would have been possible without you," he said. "You taught me to keep going, to believe even when things are hard." Sophie shook her head. "I didn't teach you anything. You found it yourself. I just helped you see it." Mark realized she was right. Sophie's act of kindness had been the spark, but it was his love for Lily, his determination, and his willingness to try that had fueled the journey. And as he walked home that night, Lily's hand in his, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The future was still uncertain, but with kindness, perseverance, and love, he knew they could face whatever came next. Life had started to feel a little lighter for Mark and Lily, though the shadow of financial struggles never fully disappeared. Some days he could pay the bills on time, other days he had to stretch every dollar, skipping small comforts to make ends meet. But Sophie's continued kindness and encouragement had rekindled a spark of hope in him, and he clung to it fiercely. One chilly morning, Mark's old car broke down. It had been acting up for weeks, sputtering and stalling, but now it refused to start at all. The repair bill was more than he could afford, and without a car, commuting to his construction job would be nearly impossible. Panic surged through him. How could he manage work, bills, and Lily without transportation? He walked to the diner, feeling the weight of despair heavy on his shoulders. Sophie noticed immediately. "Mark, you look stressed," she said, concern flickering in her eyes. He slumped into a booth. "It's the car. It's completely dead. I don't know how I'll get to work or take care of Lily. Everything's piling up." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "Let's see what we can do. Sometimes problems feel bigger when we face them alone." Before Mark could respond, Sophie had already picked up the phone. She called a local mechanic she knew, explaining the situation. Within hours, the mechanic agreed to provide a temporary loaner car until Mark could manage the repair cost, no questions asked. Mark stared at her, stunned. "Sophie, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," she said with a smile. "Just promise me you'll keep going. Lily needs you strong." That evening, Lily bounded into the apartment, hugging her father tightly. "Daddy, I saw Sophie. She said we could have a car." Mark smiled, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, baby. We'll be okay." Lily's innocence and trust reminded Mark why he had to keep pushing forward. She had no concept of money, bills, or hardships, only love, hope, and the belief that her father could overcome anything. Sophie had reignited that hope, not just in him, but in Lily as well. As weeks passed, Mark found himself becoming more resourceful. He took on extra side jobs whenever possible, fixing neighbors' fences, painting houses, and running errands. He was tired, sometimes exhausted, but the energy of responsibility and love for Lily kept him moving. Sophie's support never wavered. Some mornings, she would prepare an extra muffin or cup of cocoa for Lily, slipping it discreetly into a bag so that Mark wouldn't feel embarrassed. Other times, she quietly offered encouragement. "You're doing an amazing job. Don't let the stress get to you. You're stronger than you know." Mark realized her kindness wasn't just about the immediate help. Her words, her faith in him were teaching him resilience. One particularly cold morning, the heater in their apartment broke. Mark tried to fix it, but the repair costs were far beyond his budget. Lily shivered as he wrapped her in blankets. He felt helpless and frustrated. The next day, Sophie noticed him looking tired and anxious. Without a word, she handed him a small envelope. "This is from a local charity I know. They help families with emergency repairs. It's anonymous, no strings attached." Mark opened it carefully. Inside was enough to cover the heater repair. He felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by her thoughtfulness. "Sophie, you didn't have to do this," he whispered. She smiled softly. "I didn't. I wanted to. Sometimes helping is its own reward." Mark began to understand a truth he had long forgotten. The smallest acts of kindness could have the most profound impact. Sophie hadn't just fed them or given temporary assistance. She had reminded him that the world still had good people, that hope could be nurtured, and that he wasn't alone in his struggles. Lily, too, learned lessons about generosity. One afternoon, she insisted on sharing her cookies with a classmate who had forgotten their snack. Mark watched, proud, realizing that Sophie's influence had reached his daughter, teaching her compassion and empathy. The months rolled on. Mark's situation slowly stabilized. He had a reliable car stay, 80 work, and a slightly improved apartment. Still, the challenges never completely disappeared. But he had grown stronger, more resilient, and more hopeful. Sophie remained a constant presence. Her small gestures, coffee refills, encouraging words, little treats for Lily, reminded him daily that kindness could bridge gaps that money or status never could. One evening, as Mark prepared dinner, he looked at Lily and said, "You know, sweetie, sometimes people come into our lives when we least expect it, and they change everything." Lily nodded, her eyes wide. "Like Sophie." "Yes, exactly like Sophie," he replied, smiling. Mark realized something profound. Life was unpredictable. full of hardships, setbacks, and moments of despair. But it was also full of unexpected kindnesses that could alter the course of everything. A warm meal, a kind word, a helping hand. These small things could rebuild hope, restore strength, and teach lessons that money never could. And for Mark, Sophie had become more than a kind waitress. She had become a symbol of hope, an anchor in the storm, and a quiet guide helping him navigate the challenges of life. Spring arrived slowly, painting the streets with a light green hue and soft blossoms. For Mark, life had begun to feel less like survival and more like progress. The small victories, steady work, a reliable car, a functioning heater, reminded him that life was not just about hardship. It was also about persistence, hope, and the quiet kindnesses that kept him moving forward. One morning, the diner held a community breakfast event. Families who were struggling financially were invited to enjoy a hot meal, courtesy of donations collected by Sophie and the local patrons. Mark attended with Lily, who was bubbling with excitement at the thought of pancakes and syrup. The diner was crowded, full of chatter, laughter, and the scent of fresh food. Sophie moved through the crowd with her usual warmth, serving pancakes, eggs, and coffee. She greeted each person with genuine interest, never rushing, always smiling. Mark watched, inspired by how much one person's kindness could influence an entire room. "Daddy," Lily said, tugging at his sleeve, "look at all the people. We're helping them eat." "Yes, baby," he said softly. "We're lucky to be part of something bigger than ourselves." Sophie noticed Mark and waved him over. "You've done so much already," she said. "I thought it would be nice for you to meet some of the families you're helping too." Mark looked around. There were single parents, elderly couples, and children like Lily. He realized that small acts, like the kindness Sophie had shown him, had a ripple effect far beyond what he could have imagined. As the breakfast continued, a representative from a local construction company approached Mark. "Excuse me," the man said. "I heard about your story, how you've been working hard despite challenges. We have an opening that we think you'd be perfect for." Mark's heart raced. "Me? I don't know what to say." The man smiled. "Say yes. We've seen your dedication, and we'd like to give you a chance to prove yourself on a bigger project. You have the skills and the drive." Mark turned to Sophie, who nodded encouragingly. "You've earned this," she said. "Go for it." With Lily in his arms, Mark felt a surge of gratitude. He had faced endless obstacles, yet here was an opportunity that could change their lives. The next weeks were challenging, but rewarding. Mark worked long hours on the new construction project, often thinking of Sophie and the way her kindness had kept him afloat during the toughest days. He realized that her belief in him had inspired him to believe in himself, a lesson far more valuable than any paycheck. Meanwhile, Sophie continued her quiet acts of generosity. She checked in on Mark and Lily, offering small treats, encouraging words, or advice when needed. It was never intrusive. It was always supportive, like a steady light in the background of their lives. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Mark walked into the diner to find Sophie closing up. "Hey," she said warmly. "How was the first day on the new project?" "Tiring but good," Mark replied, smiling despite the exhaustion. "I realized something today. All the struggles, the small moments of doubt, they taught me resilience. And a lot of it is because of you." Sophie waved him off. "I just did what anyone with a heart would do." "No," Mark said firmly. "You did more than that. You reminded me that kindness exists, that helping others is powerful, and that we don't have to face challenges alone." Sophie's eyes softened. "I'm glad it helped, Mark. Really glad." As the weeks progressed, Mark began sharing what he had learned with Lily. He encouraged her to help others whenever she could, no matter how small the gesture. He wanted her to understand that kindness was a force that could transform lives. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Lily noticed a boy sitting alone on a bench, shivering in the spring breeze. Without hesitation, she offered him half of her sandwich. Mark watched with pride as Lily's actions mirrored the lessons she had learned from Sophie's example. The community began to take notice of Sophie's ongoing kindness. Word spread about the waitress who quietly supported struggling families, inspiring others to contribute in their own ways. Small donations poured in. Volunteers offered their time, and the diner became a hub of hope and generosity. Mark, now more confident and stable in his life, contributed too. He organized small repair projects for elderly neighbors, helped struggling parents find temporary work, and even coordinated local fundraisers. He realized that Sophie's act of kindness had not only helped him, it had created a chain reaction that strengthened the entire community. One evening, as the diner closed and Mark and Lily walked home, he turned to Sophie. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done," he said. "You didn't just feed us. You gave me the courage to keep going and the wisdom to help others. You've changed our lives." Sophie smiled. "You changed your own life, Mark. I just reminded you of what you already had inside." Mark looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully beside him. "No, Sophie, you really did. You showed us that a little kindness can go a long way, and because of you, we can now pass that on." Mark understood something profound. That night, life's hardships would never completely disappear. There would always be struggles, bills to pay, and obstacles to overcome. But kindness, love, and generosity could transform those hardships into opportunities for growth, courage, and hope. And he knew that Sophie's simple act, stepping in to help when he couldn't even afford breakfast, had done far more than fill an empty stomach. It had filled a life with hope, created resilience, and inspired a chain of generosity that would continue to grow. The weeks turned into months, and Mark's life began to stabilize. He had a reliable job on the construction project. His apartment was warm and secure, and Lily was thriving in school. Yet Mark knew that stability wasn't permanent. Life had a way of testing those who had come from struggle. One morning, a call came that tested everything he had worked for. The construction project faced budget cuts, and the possibility of layoffs loomed. Mark's heart sank. After months of hard work, he was again staring at uncertainty. He left the construction site early and walked to the diner, the place that had become a refuge in or ways than one. Sophie was behind the counter, wiping down tables. She looked up as he entered, immediately noticing the tension in his face. "Mark, what's wrong?" she asked gently. He slumped into a booth, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "They might lay me off. I don't know what I'd do. I can't lose this job. Lily and I..." His voice cracked. Sophie sat across from him, her expression calm but resolute. "Listen, Mark, you've come so far. You've faced challenges and never given up. This is just another test. You're stronger than you think." Mark took a deep breath, absorbing her words. She reminded him of all the times she had helped without expectation, the meals, the encouragement, and the faith she had shown in him. Her kindness had been a constant beacon, guiding him through despair. "You're right," he said finally. "I can't give up. I'll figure this out." Sophie smiled. "That's the spirit. And remember, help can come from the most unexpected places." That evening, Lily noticed her father was worried. She took his hand in hers and said, "Daddy, you always help me when I'm scared. You can help yourself too, right?" Mark hugged her tightly. "Yes, baby. You're right. I can..." Her simple words reminded him of the lessons Sophie had taught, not just about receiving help, but about using strength and kindness to move forward. Over the next few days, Mark worked tirelessly. He spoke with colleagues, suggested cost-saving measures, and volunteered to take on extra responsibilities. His dedication caught the attention of the project manager, who ultimately decided to keep him on. Not only that, but Mark's proactive ideas improved workflow, securing the project's future. When he received the news, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of relief. He immediately thought of Sophie and Lily, the two people whose presence had been the foundation of his perseverance. The diner was quiet that evening when Mark returned with Lily. He approached Sophie, who looked up with a curious smile. "Sophie," he began, voice thick with emotion, I wanted to tell you, we made it. I kept my job, and things are going to be okay. All of this, it's because of you. You never judged, never hesitated to help, and you gave me hope when I had none." Sophie shook her head gently. "Mark, you did all the hard work. I just reminded you of your own strength. You've earned everything through your determination and love for Lily." Lily climbed onto Mark's lap, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you, Sophie," she said sweetly. "You helped Daddy and me." Sophie knelt down, hugging Lily briefly. "You're welcome, sweetie. And remember, kindness is like a ripple. It spreads farther than you can see. Never stop being kind, no matter what." Mark watched, his heart full. He realized that Sophie had not only helped him survive, but had also taught Lily an invaluable lesson. Compassion, courage, and generosity were more powerful than money, fear, or obstacles. Months later, Mark's life had settled into a rhythm of stability and hope. He and Lily continued visiting the diner regularly, not just for meals, but to support Sophie and give back to others when they could. Mark had become an advocate for struggling families, organizing community events and helping neighbors, inspired by the kindness that had once saved him. Lily thrived in school, often sharing stories of generosity and helping classmates in small ways, reflecting the lessons Sophie had instilled in both father and daughter. One evening, as Mark closed the apartment window and looked at the city lights, he reflected on the journey. The struggling father who couldn't afford breakfast had grown into a man capable of providing stability, hope, and guidance. And it all began with a simple act of kindness, a warm meal from a waitress who believed in the power of compassion. Mark turned to Lily, who was quietly reading on the couch. "You know, sweetheart," he said softly, "we've learned something important. No matter how hard life gets, kindness can change everything." Lily smiled, hugging her rabbit. "Just like Sophie," she said. "Yes, exactly like Sophie," Mark replied. In the months and years that followed, Mark continued to live by that principle. The diner remained a symbol of hope, Sophie a reminder that generosity was transformative, and the small lessons of courage, resilience, and compassion were carried forward by Lily and Mark in their own lives. The struggling dad who couldn't afford breakfast had learned a profound truth: sometimes the smallest gestures can spark the greatest changes. A simple act of kindness, given without expectation, had not only filled their stomachs, but had nourished their hearts, strengthened their resolve, and changed the trajectory of their lives forever. Mark, Sophie, and Lily, bound together by compassion and gratitude, had proven that even in the toughest circumstances, hope, empathy, and generosity could illuminate the darkest days, leaving a lasting impact on the lives they touched.